Hello everyone, welcome to Jodial tutorial channel. So today we are going to discuss about different asynchronous methods like future method, queueable apex, batch apex, and then we will discuss the detailed comparison among all of these. So let's start with future method. So the future method is a process that can be executed asynchronously. And because it is asynchronous process, that's why it will not be a part of the main execution from where it is getting called. And to define this method, we need to use @future annotation. This method would always be a static method, and it only allow primitive data type as a parameter. And if we talk about the utilization of this future method, generally for making any call out, we can use future method. So let me show you an example of future method. So let's say we have a class, and in this class we have created a method process records, and this method we have allowed call out also. So just to allow any call out in future method, we need to use call out equal to true in annotation @future. So in this method we can see that this method is only allowing the parameter that is the primitive. It does not allow any s object as a or any non-primitive as a parameter. So now next one is queueable apex. So queueable apex we can understand in a way that it is more advanced than future method. So basically queueable jobs are very similar to the future method, but it has some different additional benefit that makes it very advanced than future method. For example, we can monitor its ID as a job ID, and we can also pass non-primitive parameters in this method, and we can make a chain. What is the chain here? Means if we are running a queueable apex method, then one queueable apex can call to another queueable apex. So that's why we can implement a chain over here. Let's say there are two processes, and the one process depends on another one. So firstly, we need to let first process happens, and then from there at the end of that process we can call the next one. So accordingly we can maintain a chaining between these two processes. So there's a way of calling queueable apex like system.enqueueJob, and then we need to just put the object of the class, the queueable class, in this system.enqueueJob method, and it will execute this queueable apex. So here I have defined a class Apex Queueable example, and it is implementing an interface queueable. So there's a method execute, so it will be automatically run whenever we enqueue this job, and whatever the logic we have written in this method will be automatically executed. And let's say if there are two queueable classes, so one queueable class can call to the second one. So let me show you how we can do that. So let's say here, so let's say we have one class, first queueable example, and this is the apex queueable class, and as soon as we run its execute method, so after running the logic we can implement a chaining. So let's say we have another queueable class, and that queueable class is second job, so we can implement this chaining. We can call the second queueable class from the first one, like system.enqueueJob. We can just pass the object of that second class. So in this way we can implement the chaining between apex queueable classes. Batch apex. So batch apex is another asynchronous method that batch apex. So batch apex is another asynchronous method, and that is useful for processing a large amount of data. Let's say we have tons of data and we need to process that. So because in any synchronous job that cannot handle it because of the governor limits, and we may hit any of the limit during the processing that data. Let's say we have 5 million records, then we cannot process those 5 million records at one transaction. That's why we need to convert that data into different batches. So that's why this process is called batch apex, and it has three methods: start, execute, and finish. Start and finish methods only gets executed once, but this execute method will be executing the whole data in different chunks and different batches. We can set the batch size depending on our requirement. Let's say we can set it for 10, 20, 200. And here is the way of calling the apex batch. That is the, let's say we have a class called example batch class. So we just need to create an object of that class, and then we need to put that object in database.execute batch. This is how we can run this batch class, and we will receive a batch ID, the job ID. So we can also monitor that job from the apex job queue. Let me show you an example. So let's say we have created a class here, and here this one is the constructor. So we are just passing some few parameters so that we can control the query. And here we can see that the start, execute, and finish. So as soon as this query will be executed here, it will return a lot of data. But because we are in batch, so according to the batch size, only the fixed amount of records that is defined as a batch size will be executed in this execute method at a time. And once it gets executed, then the second batch will be executed. And once it is done, the next batch will be executed, and so on. And once all the batches are done, then we will win finish method. Yeah, we can also call one batch from another. So if we want to run one batch from another, then we need to call that another batch from finish method of the first one. So now coming to the comparison part. So we have discussed here future method, Queueable Apex, and batch Apex. So now let's discuss from the comparison point of view, the difference among future method, Queueable Apex, and batch Apex. So the basic introduction. So if we talk about the introduction, so as I said before that, it is a way to run processes in a different thread. Different thread means asynchronous way, so that it will not be a part of the main thread from where it was executed. The Queueable Apex, yeah, it enables to add the job in queue. It means it is enhancing the way of calling the asynchronous method. So it is advanced format of future method, because in future method we can call only one method at a time, but in Queueable Apex we can call one method at a time, but that method, I mean that execute method, execute Queueable Apex, can call the next Queueable Apex. So that chaining can happen here. Batch Apex, it is a way to deal with a lot of complex data. So if we have a large amount of data, to process those data in Apex, we need to use Apex batch when we need it. When we just need asynchronous processing, whenever we have to have a asynchronous process to execute any logic, we can call future method, Queueable Apex. So we always need Queueable Apex when we need a chaining. I mean, if one process is dependent on another one, then only we should use a Queueable Apex, batch Apex. So just to deal with the large amount of data, we need to use batch Apex. And we can also schedule it. Interface. So future method does not have an interface. Queueable method, definitely it has interface, and it implements a queueable interface, batch Apex. It also refers a batchable interface, and it provides three methods: start, execute, and finish. While in Queueable Apex, there was only one method, execute. Support object. So future method does not support any S object as a parameter, but in Queueable Apex and batch Apex, in both we can pass S object parameter. Can monitor this job. Okay, so in future method, whenever we run any future method, it does not generate any job ID, so we cannot monitor it. But Queueable Apex and batch Apex, definitely we can monitor it in our Apex queue. Execution. So future method cannot be called from any other future method or batch class. Queueable Apex can be called from future method and batch class. An Apex batch can be called from another batch class. Can we schedule it? No. Future method cannot be scheduled. And similarly, Queueable Apex can also not be scheduled. Batch Apex, it can be scheduled. Get content and get content as PDF. So these two methods are not allowed in Batch Apex, but these methods are allowed in future method and Queueable Apex. Data chunks. So as we have already discussed that to deal with a lot of data, we use Batch Apex, and there we break a lot of data into different chunks. In it, I mean the batches. But in Queueable Apex and future method, we do not break data set into different chunks. Governor limit. So future method, we can only run 50 future methods at a time in single transaction. So from a single transaction, we can only fire 50 future methods at a time. While Queueable Apex and Batch Apex, like whenever we run the job, like we can only set a chain of 50 jobs at a time for Queueable Apex. But for Batch Apex, we can only run 5 Batch Apex jobs at a time. HTTP callout. Future methods allows the HTTP callout, and it's a main use, and it's a usage of future method. It's a main usage of future method. In Queueable Apex also we can do the callout, but there's a limitation that in one chaining there can only be one callout at a time. Let's say if we have 3 classes in a chain, and let's say second class has used the HTTP callout, then third one or the first one cannot use the HTTP callout. For Batch Apex, yes, we can do the callout in Batch Apex, and we can do one callout in one batch at a time. And for Batch Apex, yes, we can do the callout, and for one batch we can call 10 callouts at a time. So we have discussed here about the future method, Queueable Apex, and Batch Apex, their definition, their uses, their features, their benefits, and limitations. And we have also discussed the comparison among all these three. So I hope you understand now what are the future method, Queueable Apex, and Batch Apex, and where we need to use future method or Batch Apex. So I hope you like this tutorial. Thank you so much.